couple of years back, in a small village called Willow Creek, there was an old, forgotten house tucked away in a quiet corner. It had been empty for nearly 15 years, hidden behind overgrown bushes and tall trees. The place was falling apart, and no one wanted to buy it, so it just sat there, swallowed by nature. I've always been curious about creepy, abandoned spots like this, so one sunny afternoon when I had nothing to do, I decided to check it out. I grabbed a backpack, a flashlight, and headed out alone. Usually I'd go with my buddies, but this house was just a short walk from my place, and it didn't seem like a big deal. The path to the house was barely there. Grass and weeds had taken over what used to be a dirt trail. I trudged through, flicking on my flashlight as the trees got thicker and it got harder to see. After walking for what felt like 10 minutes, I finally saw the house. It was an old, single-story wooden building, kind of like a big shed with peeling paint. I crept up to a cracked window and peeked inside, listening carefully for any sounds. It was dead quiet, so I went to the front door. It was already half open, creaking as I pushed it wider and stepped in. Inside, the place was a mess. The air smelled musty, and there were still things left behind from whoever lived there ages ago. In the main room, I saw a ripped-up armchair covered in dust and some old books scattered on the floor. I poked around for a bit, wondering about the people who used to call this place home. The house wasn't huge, so I soon decided to check out the back rooms. As I walked down a narrow hallway, I heard a loud bang from somewhere in the house. My stomach dropped. It didn't sound like the house settling. It was too sharp, too deliberate. I froze, shining my flashlight around, but everything was still. My gut told me something was wrong. I'm not the bravest person, and being alone, I wasn't about to stick around to find out what made that noise. I hurried back toward the front door, but when I got there, it was closed. I know I'd left it open. My hands shook as I grabbed the handle, but it wouldn't budge. It was stuck, like someone had locked it from the outside. Panic hit me hard. Someone else had to be here. I ran to the cracked window I'd seen earlier, climbed out, and bolted into the trees, turning off my flashlight so no one could spot me. As I weaved through the woods, catching my breath, I noticed a strange glow up ahead. I ducked behind a tree and saw flashing lights, red and white, coming from the direction of the house. It was an ambulance, speeding down the overgrown path toward the house. I stayed hidden, watching as it stopped in front of the place. Something told me they weren't there for me. I didn't stick around. I ran all the way home, my heart pounding. In the days after, I tried to find out what happened, checked local news, asked around, but there was nothing. No reports, no gossip, nothing. Whatever went down in that house, it was serious, and I'm just glad I got out when I did. Back in 2016, I was living with my two best friends, who I'll call Ethan and Lucas to keep their names private. We were roommates in a small apartment in a bustling town while wrapping up our final year of college. Between classes and part-time jobs, we didn't get much free time. When we did, we loved to go on adventures, hiking, wandering through nearby woods, or checking out random places we'd never been to. One weekend, we all had Saturday night free, so we wanted to do something fun. Lucas had heard from a co-worker about an old, shut-down warehouse just outside of town. It sounded spooky but kind of cool, and none of us had ever explored a place like that before. We were a bit nervous, but we decided to go for it. We piled into Ethan's car and drove to the edge of town, where the building stopped, and it was just open fields for miles. That's where the warehouse was supposed to be. We didn't have an exact address, but we spotted it on a map app and parked at a nearby convenience store to walk the rest of the way. The street leading to the warehouse was dead quiet. No cars, no people, just an eerie vibe. The warehouse was huge, way bigger than we expected, with rusted pipes crisscrossing the outside and faded graffiti splashed across the walls. There was a tall fence with some rusty barbed wire on top, but parts of it were bent open, probably from other people sneaking in. We carefully slipped through a gap and headed to a side door that was already ajar. As soon as we stepped inside, I got chills. The whole place was creaking, and the wind outside made the walls groan. It was pitch black, so we used some old flashlights Lucas had grabbed from his car. We were in a massive room filled with giant, rusty machines and narrow walkways between them. We stuck together at first, just poking around, looking at the dusty equipment. After a bit, I wandered toward a doorway leading to another part of the building. I glanced back and saw one of my friends a few steps behind me in the shadows, so I figured it was safe to keep going. I walked through the doorway into a smaller room with a big, broken-down machine in the center and some metal stairs leading up to a platform above. Just as the door swung shut behind me, I heard footsteps coming from the direction I'd just come from. Thinking it was Ethan or Lucas, I didn't worry and started shining my flashlight around. Then I heard the door creak open and shut again. I called out, "Ethan? Lucas?" and turned around, but when I aimed my flashlight at the door, no one was there. My heart started racing. I was sure I'd heard someone. I called their names again, louder, but got no answer. Feeling uneasy, I walked back to the door and opened it, shining my light down the hallway. It was empty. Before I could figure out what was going on, I heard a faint shuffle behind me. I spun around, and my flashlight landed on a guy standing just a few feet away. He looked rough, tangled hair, wild eyes, and dirty clothes. He stared at me for a split second, then charged right at me. I stumbled back, slammed the door shut, and ran as fast as I could toward the main room, shouting for my friends. I found Ethan and Lucas, who were calling my name, looking for me. "We gotta go," I yelled. We bolted out of the warehouse, scrambled through the fence, and didn't stop until we were back at the car. As we drove off, I told them what happened. That guy must have been hiding in the warehouse, waiting for me to wander off alone. I don't know what he wanted, but I'm glad I didn't find out. We haven't gone back to exploring places like that since. That night was enough adventure for a lifetime. About 5 years ago, when I was in high school, I had a close friend named Mason. We'd hang out almost every day after school, usually just wandering around town looking for something to do. This happened during winter break, when we had tons of free time and no plans. We spent most of one day at Mason's house, messing around on his gaming console, but we got restless and decided to go for a walk. Our town had this old, abandoned chapel at the end of a quiet, overgrown road. Everyone knew about it. It was hidden behind trees and bushes, left to rot for years. As kids, we thought it was spooky, but that day, as we passed the road leading to it, I felt curious instead of scared. Mason and I decided to check it out, just to see what it looked like now. Maybe if it seemed safe, we'd even peek inside. It was getting dark, but the sky was clear, and we could see okay. We had our phones for flashlights if we needed them. The road to the chapel was a mess, cracked pavement with weeds and vines poking through. By the time we reached the chapel, the street we came from was completely out of sight. The building looked creepier than I remembered, like the forest was swallowing it whole. The fence around it was rusted and covered in plants. We found a gap in the fence and slipped through. It was super quiet. No lights, no sounds, nothing to suggest anyone else was around. We walked up to the big front door and pushed it open. It creaked loudly, scraping against the floor, and the sound echoed inside. We stood at the entrance for a moment, just looking around. The weirdest thing was how clean the place looked. The rows of pews were dusty but untouched. No trash, no graffiti. Nothing like you'd expect in an abandoned building. I stepped inside, and Mason followed. We walked slowly down the aisle, our footsteps echoing in the big, empty space. As we got near the front, there was a loud bang that echoed through the whole chapel. We both froze, pulling out our phone flashlights. We couldn't tell where the sound came from. It seemed to bounce around the walls. We scanned the room, but didn't see anything that could have caused it. Mason thought it might have come from a side room near the entrance, like something fell over. We decided to keep looking around. I walked up to the front, where there was a small stage with a podium, and looked back toward the entrance. It was so dark my flashlight barely reached that far. Mason wanted to check out the side room, so we headed that way. There was a door on the wall, and I pushed it open. Inside, it looked like a storage area, stacks of old chairs, some boxes, and random junk. As we poked around, we heard another sound, a soft thump, then another, like footsteps coming from the main room. We stopped dead. The sounds were coming from the direction of the stage, moving toward the entrance. We peeked through the slightly open door, staring into the dark. For a split second, we saw a shadow move across the entrance and slip out the front door. The footsteps stopped, and then we heard the door creak shut. My heart was pounding. Mason and I just stared at each other, too scared to move. We didn't know if we should run or hide. We ended up waiting in the storage room for what felt like forever, barely breathing, until we were sure whoever, or whatever, it was had left. Then we bolted out of the room, through the front door, and didn't stop running until we were back on the main street. We never figured out who was in there. The creepy part is, they must have been near the stage where I was standing, and there weren't any other doors back there. They had to have been hiding somewhere close by. Even now, years later, I'm not sure what we saw, or if it was even human.